Hello. The planet Uranus enters 0 degrees of Gemini on April 25th, 2026, after a 7-year cycle in Earth fixed sign Taurus. So I wanted to do a mini talk about what this means for us collectively, and I'm just going to talk about myself personally because that's what I enjoy doing, is relating the planetary cycles to our own individual charts. So the planet Uranus cycle is 84 years. The last time it was in the air mutable sign of Gemini was it ingressed into 0 Gemini in 1941. And during the 7-year period, we had World War II, where there was changes in borders and control of borders, and there was definite technological advancements in the radio industry and the emergence of the emerging days of television. Communication was being, disseminated and communicated in new and innovative ways. It was paving the way for what was to come in the 50s and the 60s, with even further advancement. So now here we are. Uranus has been in the fixed sign Taurus since 2018. And as I reflect back, so first of all, let me back up and say that Uranus represents rapid change, potential disruptions, change to the status quo, revolution, individuality, rebellion, possibly. Uranus in an extreme can, depending on the entire collective planetary alignments, can also sometimes represent war. Now, with Uranus going into the air sign of Gemini is communication. So we already know that AI is making a huge entry into our collective. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people weigh the benefits versus the detriments. So with changes to technology are going to include further developments with AI, technology changes with probably social media, all forms of communication, education. Things are going to move rapidly in these types of areas. Air sign is very curious. Okay, air signs want to learn. They want to adapt. Their mind is curious. Their mind is innovative. I'm talking about the collective mindset. Our individual selves, depending on what house Uranus is transiting in our natal birth chart, will help us understand where we're going to experience changes in the Gemini fashion. And Gemini, the myth of Gemini is the twins, Castor and Pollux. So there's a duality with Gemini, okay? It can be scattered energy. It's an important time when Uranus, the planet of change and sometimes instability, is in a air sign that wants to adapt very quickly and go from one thing to another, to ground ourselves and to remember that. This can be a challenging cycle for some of us. Now, Uranus is personally leaving my 10th house of my public status, my parents, my career, if I had a career, my status in general, okay? My life direction. Okay. It is now entering, as of tomorrow, my 11th house of my long-term goals, my friendships, my group affiliations, networking, and things of that nature. So let me reflect back and share some insight. So while Uranus has been in my 10th house, my mother passed away in 2000. Uranus entered in Taurus in 2018. So my mother was very sick, and I remember she passed away in April of 2019. And within a week of her passing, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer. So I had to take action, and I remember it was a shock. It was a total shock because my mother had just passed. And, to have that, diagnosis right then and there was a sudden abrupt disruption to our lives. So I had to help my father to get lung surgery. He had partial lobectomy in the summer of 2019. And then Uranus in my 10th house was the instability and disruptions. And in my, the 10th house can also be the parental axis. Often I see it more as the mother, but also the father, depending on the situation. After my mother died, I tried to very part-time, get back into astrology, but it wasn't easy because my father needed a lot of care, and I don't regret a minute of it. During this cycle, there were changes where he was living. He chose to downsize, and during this time, finances. Taurus is also about finances. My father was making lots of financial changes because he was preparing. He had lung surgery when he was 89 years old. He was preparing for his eventual passing away. So there were lots of discussions about finances and how things were going to be distributed and left to remaining family members and such things. Taxes, insurance, and all of those matters were up for, change and sometimes disruption. And I certainly took a lot of online courses trying to determine if I wanted to specialize, go back to work part-time and specialize in a different branch of astrology. But I also studied life coaching and other modalities. So to make a long story short, Uranus in the 10th house was mostly about caregiving to my dad, experimenting with different modes of putting myself out there to the public when I was able to. And I look forward to Uranus leaving the sign of Taurus and entering Gemini because I have both the Mercury and the Sun in the sign of Libra, which is another air sign. So it will eventually trine my Mercury, and it will eventually trine my Sun, which is ruler of my ascendant, which is my first house, which is very important. That's your chart ruler. So that's a very flowing, exciting energy. New people, new experiences, exciting changes, improvement in health potentially. Uranus trining my Mercury is just going to accelerate my desire to learn even more astrology, which is a lifelong endeavor. You can never stop learning. And I still have a lot of learning to do, even though I've been studying for years. So, yes. So Uranus enters zero Gemini April 25th. That is tomorrow during this recording. 2026. So check out your whole sign house. As I always say, you can, if you don't have software, just go on astro.com. If you know your birth information, you really need to know your time, ideally, to find out what house Uranus will be transiting. So here's to a new 7-year cycle. And I wish you all the best. Bye for now.